Finally, we provide for individuals a 15% flat tax option. This is something they do in Hong Kong. You can keep the current code with all of its deductions, or you can fill out a single page, list how much you earn, how many dependents you have, pay 15%. And that way people have the option to either keep records or not keep records, but you have the choice, not the politician. Part one is taxes. Part two, regulation. I will ask the new Congress on January 3rd, before I am sworn in, to stay in office and repeal Obamacare, repeal Dodd-Frank, repeal Obamacare, which is a job-killing anti-small business bill. They should repeal Dodd-Frank because it is killing small independent banks, crippling small business, and driving down the price of housing, which dropped again yesterday, by the way, which means the middle-class investment in their homes lost value again yesterday. And so if you repeal Dodd-Frank, you help small business, you help the value of housing, and you help independent small banks who are currently being crushed by red tape. I would also ask them to repeal Sarbanes-Oxley, which is a bill which has huge red tape and has produced no information of any value during the last 3 years. Those three things will start to liberate American business. I would replace, and I'd like those three done before I am sworn in, so that the day after I'm sworn in, I could sign them, and we had that part of it done in January, and we could go about passing good reforms to replace the bad reforms that we've repealed. By the way, on the day of I'm inaugurated, we'll have a day one plan, which we will publish by October 1 of next year. I will sign, about 2 hours after I'm sworn in, I will sign between 100 and 200 executive orders. The very first executive order will abolish all of the White House czars as of that moment. In addition to repealing those three bills, I would ask the Congress to replace the Environmental Protection Agency with a brand new Environmental Solutions Agency, and I mean replace. I believe the current bureaucracy at EPA is so radical, so anti-jobs, and so anti-local community, and so lacking in common sense that you cannot reform it. Everywhere I go, whether it's in South Carolina, New Hampshire, here in Iowa, small towns tell me they are being crushed by EPA bureaucrats in Washington who have never visited their town, have no idea what they're demanding, and the economic cost of EPA to small towns in America is extraordinary. When you go out and you talk to businesses, I mean, they have a proposal on electricity which will almost certainly lead to brownouts, and at a time when we're trying to compete in the world market, will dramatically raise the cost of electricity. Many of you know Senator Grassley spent a year fighting their dust provisions. I mean, an agency which takes the general ability to look at particulate matter and clean air and turns that into a bureaucratic study of whether or not when you plow, the dirt from your field will drift into the neighboring field. And therefore, if the wind is high enough that the dust from your plowing will go into the neighboring field, you should not plow that day. I mean, this is, do you know how hard you have to work to be this stupid? I mean, this is some guy in the Washington area who lives in a high-rise apartment with air conditioning, goes downstairs to get on a metro with air conditioning, to ride to his high-rise office where he has no windows, and he sits and he contemplates dust. It makes no sense at all. I was in Arizona talking about what Senator Grassley was fighting. They said, it's worse in Arizona. They said, Arizona is a desert. And so we get natural dust storms. And we had somebody out here from EPA, and they said to us, well, maybe what you should do is water down the dirt so you don't get these dust storms. And they said, we were trying to explain to them, the reason it's called a desert is we don't have any water. Now this is how, so I would like to replace EPA with an Environmental Solutions Agency based on common sense and practicality. I would like to modernize the Food and Drug Administration so that its new job becomes to be in the laboratory, understanding science, and accelerating getting it to the patient so that we could be the leading developer of new medicine, new technology, because as the world market grows, health is going to be the best producer of new high-value jobs. And we want an FDA that helps us be at the top of that market, doesn't hurt us. Finally, get to energy. Let me say unequivocally, with Ronald Reagan in 1984, some of you are old enough will remember this, I actually voted for a thing called gasohol. And he signed it. It was part of our getting away from Iran, Saudi Arabia, and the Middle East. In 1986, I voted to renew what then became ethanol. In 1998, when big oil tried to kill ethanol, Senator Grassley said, I was the person who saved it. And there's a practical reason. If I have to choose between $1 billion going to Iran or going to Iowa, I prefer Iowa. If I have to choose $1 billion going to Saudi Arabia or going to South Dakota, I prefer South Dakota. When you watch the Iranians, the news this morning, they are practicing how to close the Straits of Hormuz. Now, Pliskin and I had lunch with Secretary of State George Shultz, who had been Ronald Reagan's Secretary of State, at the Reagan Library on President Reagan's 100th birthday. And Secretary of State Shultz said to me, said the two of us, how often do we have to get hit over the head with a 2x4 to realize we need a national energy policy that maximizes American energy production? If the Straits of Hormuz are closed, you will see a catastrophe in the world market. You will see a depression in the industrial world, and it will be a nightmare. We have had 30 years to prepare for this. We know exactly what the danger is. We know exactly what the requirement is. If you look at North Dakota, where the federal government couldn't stop it because it was on private land, the Bakken field in North Dakota has 25 times, that's 2,500% more oil and gas than the U.S. Geological Survey thought 6 years ago. And we're developing it because it's on private land. If we had a president who was pro-American energy, we would develop oil and gas, we would develop shale oil, we would develop ethanol and soy diesel and next generation biofuels. We would develop wind, where you now rival. I think only Denmark produces more electricity from wind than Iowa. We would develop all the different aspects, including coal, nuclear power, and solar. But our goal would be to produce a surplus of American energy, so in a crisis you could wave at the Middle East. My goal is to be able, as president, to never bow to a Saudi king or walk arm in arm. I want to explain to the Saudis, we don't need your oil, and we're not going to tolerate your support of terrorism. Let me say one last thing, and then I'm going to throw it open to questions. I'm not here to ask you to be for me. Because if you're for me, you're going to vote and go home and say you hope that I'll fix it. I don't think even the President of the United States can get this country back on the right track by themselves. I'm here to ask you to be with me. We need you, Pliskin and I need you to be with us for the next 8 years, to stand side by side. We need you to remind the Congress what we're trying to get done. We need you to remind the governor and the state legislature, the city council, the county commission, the school board. In addition, we need your help. If we do all the things we need to do to get America back on track, we're going to make mistakes. And when we make mistakes, we need to have social media where you can say, that ain't working, the world has changed, here's a better idea. Because we together, I don't think 537 elected officials can fix this, but I think 305 million Americans can fix it easily. But lastly, if we apply the 10th Amendment and we shrink government in Washington, we have to grow citizenship in Mason City. It's that straightforward. And in Clear Lake, we have to be in a position where everybody understands that citizenship has to rise as bureaucracy shrinks. And so I will ask you to be with me. I'd love to have your help next week. I believe we can win the general election decisively, and I will challenge the president to 7 3-hour debates in a Lincoln-Douglas tradition with a timekeeper but no moderator. And I will concede in advance that he can use a teleprompter. I mean, after all, if you had to defend Obamacare, wouldn't you want to use a teleprompter? I think we have to be fair about this. I would love to have your help, and what I'd like to do now is just toss it open for questions.